Truth.
Welcome to Trusting the Truth with Samuel Tolley, where we view the world through the lens of Jesus Christ. We do not view Jesus Christ through the lens of the world. How you doing? Samuel Tolley, and today we're going to talk about Michigan 2020 election voter fraud. Question mark. Because there's a lot of questions on the 2020 election. Now, people might say, well, why are you talking about the 2020 election when we're getting ready for the 2024 election? Precisely for that reason. Donald Trump is being prosecuted or persecuted, probably both, right now. And one of the faults, supposedly, is his claim that the election was stolen. Well, many of us think the election was stolen. Common sense and common logic would lead us to that conclusion. For example, I believe Barack Obama got 69 million plus votes the first time he ran. And I think it was 69 or 65. I didn't look it up, so please don't quote me on it. But the fact of it is Donald Trump, with his 74 plus million votes during the second time he ran, could be considered the most votes that anyone has ever received, a first term or a second term president, if it wasn't for the 81 million votes that Joe Biden supposedly got. 81 million votes from a man who never campaigned. 81 million votes from a man who ran twice before and got nowhere. Had plagiarism in one of his elections where he was, caught copying speeches from other people. A man that's been in public office, Congress and Senate for over 40 years, and his greatest claim to fame is a law which imprisoned many people, especially minorities. A man that people said that he was wrong in every foreign policy thing that there was. Joe Biden. So if we're going to believe what we were told in 2020, he received 81 million votes, more votes than anyone in history. In history. And it's very hard to believe that. The man was on the campaign trail talking about having your children listen to the record player. An 8-year-old should be able to decide if they want gender reassignment surgery, besides other things. Now, the media and many of those in Washington would have us believe it was true. But they don't want to talk about the fact that the votes were stretched throughout the night. And when most people were going to bed, Trump was comfortably ahead. And then the next morning, all of a sudden, Joe had won, locked the thing in. People would like to think that their elections are honest. People would like to think that when they cast their vote, they can depend on who's ever counting the vote to be honest. And I don't think you can depend on that in the United States anymore. It was Stalin who has said something to the effect of, it doesn't matter how many people vote, it only matters who does the counting. But Michigan, a state that Trump won in 2016 and supposedly lost in 2020, we have an interesting document from the Gateway Pundit that I want to share. And it has a lot to say about the 2020 election. And if things haven't been changed, or if things do not change, Lord knows what's going to happen next year. But let's take a look at this document from the Gateway Pundit. It says, now We have proofs, TGP is Gateway Pundit, exclusive. Massive 2020 voter fraud uncovered in Michigan. Police find tens of thousands of fake registrations, bags of prepaid gift cards, guns with silencers, funded organizations with multiple temporary facilities in several states. Sounds interesting. And it's an exclusive, like I said, from the Gateway Pundit, and it gives the reporters Benjamin Whitmore and Patty McMurray. Special thanks to Phil Hilarion and Lori Skibble for their contribution and assistance with this story. The two election integrity activists obtained a copy of the state police report and began investigating the story in June. Phil O'Halloran, now chairman of the Michigan Republican Party Election Integrity Committee, and Lori Skibble, director of Michigan's GOP's Poll Challenger program, brought it to our attention and are assisting with our research of this story. I think the story is an ongoing issue with them. On October 8, 2020, only 1 month before the 2020 general election, Muskegon, Michigan city clerk and Mesh, I believe that's how you pronounce it, noticed a black female whose name was redacted from the police report, dropping off between 8,000 and 10,000 completed voter registration applications at the city clerk's office. That's a lot of applications to drop off in one day. Muskegon Police Department was contacted and asked to investigate. Let's see. On October 21 of 2020, First Lieutenant Mike Anderson was contacted by Tom Fabus, Chief of Investigations for Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel's office. According to Michigan State Police report, Mr. Fabus asked for Michigan State Police assistance with a joint investigation of alleged voter fraud being conducted by the Muskegon Police Department and the Attorney General. An investigative task force was formed, and the investigation was initiated. The following is from the Michigan State Police report. On October 16, 2020, Muskegon City Clerk Ann Mesh and Deputy Clerk Kimberly Young contacted the Muskegon Police Department after noticing irregularities in voter registration applications and received both in person and by mail. So I guess they were having a lot of weird stuff. The Muskegon City Clerk became suspicious when the female, whose name is redacted in the first part of the police report, but then later is unredacted, hand-delivered thousands of voter registrations to her office, many of them in the same handwriting. How is that possible? How is it possible to have the same handwriting for your registration with thousands of? And who goes around collecting thousands of voter registrations? On October 20 of 2020, deadline day for in-person registration applications, the suspect returned to the Muskegon city clerk's office to deliver additional registration forms in person. Mishk estimated that suspect brought an additional 2,500 forms. Mish contacted the Muskegon Police Department and Detective Logan Anderson and Captain Shaw Bride conducted a non-custodial interview with the suspect. So they must have called the police right away. And they got over there while this person was still there. Mish, and excuse me, I'm pronouncing her name wrong, stated that in her opinion, a quantity of the voter registration forms were highly suspicious and probably fraudulent. Mish's opinion was based on the fact that numerous forms appeared to have been completed by the same writer, and upon initial examination, addresses on multiple forms were invalid or non-existent. Mish investigated further and found that phone numbers on multiple forms were erroneous, and signatures on multiple forms didn't appear to match signatures on file with the Department of Secretary of State. We have Democrats all through the country fighting voter ID, fighting for us to make sure that we have elections that we can see that the person voting is the person registered and that the person registered is legal. Why would they fight that? I think they fight it for the same reason why they're letting millions of illegals in this country. Because if you can get millions of illegals in this country that are so grateful that they can stay here, so grateful that America is taking care of them, that they believe they can get them signed up as a Democrat, legally or illegally, and get them to vote for them, which in turn keep those people in power. They don't care anything about the country. They care about money and power. Okay. Mish investigated further and found that phone numbers on multiple forms were erroneous and signatures on multiple forms didn't appear to match signatures on file with the Department of Secretary of State. Examples include an address in the and other in a, it says redacted. Those addresses do not exist in Muskegon City. A house numbering system. Another form listed 80 West Southern Avenue, which is the address of the Muskegon High School, and is clearly not a residence. Later, the report name of the female suspect was unredacted. Isn't that interesting? Redacted and unredacted. The Michigan State Police investigator assigned to the case spoke with the female suspect, who explained that she was being paid $1,150 a week to find unregistered voters and provide them with a form so they can get registered to vote or obtain their absentee ballot. So this woman's getting paid $1,150 a week, which isn't much, but it could be much of someone who's not getting anything to get these voters, to get these people registered, supposedly. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, who was currently attempting to prosecute 15 senior citizens, and the former Michigan GOP co-chair for casting an alternate set of electoral votes in the 2020 election, asked the Michigan State Police to join the Muskegon Police and the Attorney General's investigation of the potentially massive multi-city voter fraud operation. Well, this Attorney General is trying to put people in jail for the 2020 election who didn't want to certify the election for Biden because they thought that there was funny stuff going on then. And now they're trying to put these people in jail because they thought Trump won. Two members of Attorney General Dana Nessel's Criminal Investigation Division were assigned to the operation. Yet, curiously, she failed to mention the investigation to the public. Now, why is that? We're talking about October of 2020. And she never told the public while she's trying to prosecute folks that didn't agree with the election. She supposedly was part of a task force that was looking into irregularities of the election. And she never told the public. To this day, Dana Nessel is still claiming there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud in Michigan, despite the fact that she knew her office and the office of her friend, Michigan's crooked Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, were involved with the Michigan State Police in a large-scale investigation that took place across the state before it was taken over by the FBI. It's amazing. These people are supposed to be public servants, and they're not telling the public what the heck's going on. They're going to say that the election was legitimate, but they're part of a supposed investigation into fraud of that election. Let's see who we have here. This is an analyst, Corey Ames. This analyst was saying that they found that these voter applications forms were clearly fraudulent. Corey Ames, a Michigan SO Secretary of State analyst, confirmed a quantity of the forms they found in their investigation are clearly fraudulent. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson also claimed there was no widespread voter fraud in the Michigan and neglected to mention the investigation to the public. So the Secretary of State and the Attorney General say that there's no voter fraud. Don't mention it to anybody in the state of Michigan, while at the same time, they know full well that there was voter fraud. Wow. This is unbelievable. It says, after consulting with Muskegon police detective and MDOS analyst Corey Ames, your affiant would describe the results as finding that a quantity of the voter applications forms are clearly fraudulent. A quantity of the voter application forms are highly suspicious, having either erroneous or are missing key pieces of information and merit further follow-up, and the quality of the voter registration form appear to be legitimate based on the cross-checks and database reviews. Okay, today, the Gateway Pundit and our close friends from Michigan are exposing this damning report. The evidence for the investigation exposes criminal election fraud involving thousands of fraudulent ballots in Michigan by an organization that set up temporary offices in several swing states prior to the 2020 election. This explosive investigation was covered up and buried from public until today. So nobody knew about this stuff. If we had a real news service, if we had real reporters, real journalists, real investigative body of First Amendment press believers, instead of a bunch of hacks, a bunch of prostitutes, a bunch of folks that just get paid to lie to the public. This stuff would have came out before now. But the Gateway Pundit, apparently, they have some of those folks. And there's a few other organizations that are out there. But the New York Times, Washington Post, Fox, CNN, all these jokers, that's what they are jokers. Let's continue. It should be noted that after documenting these crimes and investigating for weeks, the Michigan police turned their investigation over to the FBI, who promptly buried the findings. Now, why am I not surprised? The FBI, who apparently were in cahoots with some people trying to set them up to do some kind of kidnapping of the governor of Michigan. There was some kind of hanky-panky going on with that. The FBI, who sat on Hunter Biden's laptop for a year, and we would have never found out about it if it wasn't for the guy that ran the laptop store. The FBI knew about this and sat on it. Wow. Once again, the FBI apparently took no action. More on that in an upcoming report. So apparently these people are going to be bringing out more information. Excuse me. The police in Muskegon were investigating voter fraud in October 2020, a month prior to the general election. The FBI failed to follow up on the alleged election crimes, according to Michigan election investigator Phil O'Halloran. O'Halloran is now the election integrity chair of the Michigan Republican Party. The police report has redactions throughout, but not all names were redacted. The police report names GBI Strategies as the organization running the scheme. The Tennessee-based group is heavily connected to the Biden campaign. Remember when Joe said we got the most, he said something to the effect, we got the most extensive voter fraud organization in history, something like that, and various Democratic campaign committees. The release report also names Burles as the primary person involved. The police report from 2020 revealed that GBI Strategies has been in operation since 2014, and the investigation found that GBI Strategies was paid $1,571,386 by the Doug Jones for Senate campaign back in 2018. That was just one race they were involved in. The investigators also found that GBI Strategies was paid $188,000 by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee in 2018. The employees at GBI Strategies were paid $15 an hour, or $120 a day. Somebody's making a killing. A woman interviewed by police said she was paid $1,150 per week and given a rental car. This is the one we talked about earlier. She said she was given a reloadable pay card. Police reported that hundreds of prepaid cards from different companies, along with dozens of new burner phones, were found in the Southfield raid in Michigan. The police report noted that there were numerous job openings listed in Flint, Michigan, and regional field manager postings in Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois. This group had branches across the nation. During their investigation, the police also found partially completed voter registration forms, partially completed. And police found Pelican cases in the room with semi-automatic rifles joined with suppressors and optics and customized pistols. One case had 4 rifles and 4 pistols. I thought Democrats didn't care for guns. The police report claimed these weapons were determined to be legal and lawful after calling in the ATF to inspect the weapons. The affiant witness who filed out the affidavit first witnessed minivans moving from a hotel in Grand Haven to the location of the business, a former California eye care location. The next day, Detective Luker was notified. He went to the address where he found a bag of trash filled with information on employee agreements. Let's see. The affidavit believed the records found at the location were crucial to determining the crime of election fraud, forgery, and determining who may be criminally liable and who may have profited from the fraud. Well, we know who profited. Joe profited big time. The affiant later obtained a copy of the Muskegon Police Report 2020-19124, authored by Officer Foster, with a supplemental report by Detective Logan Anderson, along with a copy of the search warrant of the business location. The next paragraph from the police document reveals that Muskegon City Clerk Ann Meshk and Deputy Clerk Kimberly Wong first contacted the police in October 16, 2020. Meshk and Young contacted the police after receiving multiple state of Michigan voter registration application forms, which in their opinion appeared to be fraudulent. According to the report, Ms. Meshk based her opinion on the fact that some of the addresses on the application appeared to be invalid or non-existent. Also, some of the phone numbers were invalid, and some signatures did match those on file. Mish also noted that the handwriting on the ballots appeared to be the same with a similar signature on all of the ballots. A similar signature on all of the ballots appeared to come from the same company with 2 locations in Southfield and Auburn Hills. Mish told police some of the forms were dropped off in person to the Muskegon City Clerk's office by a Black woman who identified herself as Brianna Hawkins. I think this is the person whose name was redacted earlier, and later on, I guess it was let out. Ms. Hawkins said her employment entailed registering voters and helping them obtain absentee ballots. You know, one of the reasons why we're getting in so much trouble with voting is not making people responsible enough to get up off their butt and go to the polling place. You know, so all these shenanigans with collecting votes and you know, fraudulent signatures and applications and people that don't live in places and all this stuff. This would not happen if you had people show up, show vote, show identification, match that what's on record, match the signatures of what's on record. Then we can verify. And I would also add, if it was up to me, not only would you need identification with your picture on it and match your signature, I think everybody would be required to take a thumbprint. Because if you got to go back and prove fraud, You want to get that person's fingerprint. But Democrats don't want to prove fraud. Democrats don't want to prove the votes legitimate. They want to hose us and try to shame us and say it's legitimate while all the time making it illegitimate. And the run of the mill Democrat, I'm talking about the person who just lives day to day, believe what they're said. They don't even have enough sense to realize that they're getting screwed too. Just because your side wins doesn't mean that you're winning. You may be the biggest loser because they may be hosing you while they're hosing me. And you just don't know it, but I do. Okay. Mish estimated that the leftist organization delivered approximately 8,000 to 10,000 voter registration forms to the Muskegon City Clerk's office. This is something, I guess, reiterating what we heard earlier, and provided a sampling of 42 suspected fraudulent applications to Officer Foster for examination. Mitch stated they identified by viewing her Facebook profile. Brianna Hawkins dropped off between 8 and 10,000 registration. Okay, we already know this. The investigation found that the number of voter application forms was clearly fraudulent. Okay. The report notes that police found dozens of new phones and hundreds of prepaid cards. Sound like to me, this is part of the scam is, hey, you know what? We get you to sign up just like it's you. We'll give you a card. Or you sign up, we'll give you a card. These items were clearly considered suspicious by the police in the report. Also in the report, the left-wing ballot organizing group had suppressors, that means silencers, and automatic weapons for some odd reason. Nearly 3 years later, President Trump faces multiple prosecutions because he fraudulently pursued baseless claims of voter fraud, according to prosecutors and the mainstream media. Trump won the Michigan vote in 2016 by 15,000 votes, but suspiciously lost to Joe Biden by 150,000 votes 4 years later. How is that possible? How is that possible when Trump built up the economy that was suffering when Obama left office and built up the economy again after the pandemic mess? How can he go from winning by 15,000 to losing by almost 150,000? Okay, let's see here. Despite increasing his vote share in neighboring Ohio, 16 Trump presidential electors in Michigan are being prosecuted by far-left Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, the same Dana Nessel who put two people on this task force for voter fraud, but never told the public in Michigan that there was voter fraud or a task force or a problem, and claimed that there was no voter fraud. So I don't know what the two people on the task force are there for. I think it's just for show and tell. Because according to Dana Nessel, the controversial Michigan Attorney General, they fraudulently believed that there was systemic voter fraud that was not being properly investigated. If there was no voter fraud, Attorney General, why did you put people on the task force? The released police report has redactions throughout, but not all names were redacted. The police report names GB Strategies as the organization engaged in what was reported was widespread. Okay, we already know that. systemic voter fraud in multiple locations around the state. The Tennessee group is heavily connected to the Biden campaign and various Democratic campaign committees. The release report also named Burles as a primary person involved. This is a regurgitation of past information. I'm just reading the report. I didn't write it. The police report also notes that the organization used rental cars around the state as part of its deployment, naming several of the field locations for their operations. On election night, a suspicious 3:30 a.m. van delivering the Biden ballot dump in Detroit at the facility formerly known as the TCF Center was accommodated by a vehicle registered to a rent-a-car company. Now here we go. Like I said, during the 2020 election, with the technology that we have, we should have known what the election was early, quick, but we didn't. And it was dragging, and then Trump's ahead. So you wake up in the morning, Trump's losing. He's losing because of these 3:00 in the morning dumps. Atlanta, who in the hell knows where else? Obviously in Michigan, because there's no voter integrity. There's no way for us to know what is honest unless we can see who's voting, make sure who's voting, and make sure that there ain't no shenanigans in the voting. Man, where am I? Okay. The Gateway Pundit previously obtained the video and broke the story. The Gateway Pundit has always reported that there were unanswered statistical anomalies within the absentee data. Repeated trends across the state of Michigan that appear to show systemic voter fraud among absentee ballots. Michigan State Senator Ruth Johnson, who is a former Secretary of State, told the Gateway Pundit, "My estimate is over 800,000 ballot applications were sent to non-qualified voters in Michigan." That would do it right there. 800,000? 800,000. Wow. Including many individuals who moved or died, or even some individuals who were underage or non-citizens. How could you send an application to somebody who's underage? How is that possible? Or a non-citizen? How is that possible? Many were sent to people who had moved out of state. These ballot applications, wait a minute, if they were sent to people who moved out of state, were they sent out of state? Oh. These ballot applications, if turned back in, would cause a live ballot to then be sent to that address by the clerk. Both the ballot applications and the live ballots were not seriously checked for a signature match because Democrat Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson purposely advised clerks to illegally assume and presume the signatures were a match. Why? Why would she do such a thing? Why would we assume anything? We're not supposed to assume anything. We're supposed to know what the truth is. This tip from Muskegon clerk Ann Mesh, who has been the city clerk of Muskegon since 2007, was referred to by the FBI clerk Mesh as been a city clerk for other Michigan cities for 17 years before that. So she obviously has experience doing that sort of work. There is no evidence the FBI did anything with this investigation. Have you heard anything about this from the FBI? I mean, 2020? When did they get that laptop from Hunter? In early 2019 or late 18? The FBI is as crooked as a dog's hind legs. Last week I did faking Biden's investigation, the FBI. These people, I used to grow up thinking that they were reputable, legitimate. Maybe they never were. I mean, I hear Hoover was a cross-dresser. Who knows what Comey he was? And this Ray, he sits there and smirks. And this attorney general, who's supposed to be their boss, he's no better. By the way, neither was the one before him, Barr. Sessions wasn't any good either. The only difference between, I think, Barr and Sessions was incompetent, but I think he was honest. Barr was competent. He did his job well. And his job was to run out the clock and keep tabs on Trump so he can't accomplish more than the swamp wanted him to accomplish. But it was never to get down to anything seriously, or he wouldn't have sat on that laptop for a year. And now, of course, he's ready to testify against Trump. There's no adage where it says, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And I think the swamp rats all played nice and sweet to Trump so they could stay as close to him as possible. And they were his enemy. They were all stabbing him in the back. It was just like that New York play, what Trump was analogized as Caesar, where he was being viciously stabbed to death. This is horrible. Let's see. There's no evidence the FBI did anything with this investigation. And in fact, Bill Barr, appointed DOJ attorney oversees election fraud cases, was notorious for political prosecution against conservatives. But there you go, Bill Barr. It's a joke. We have more coming on our investigation. Stay tuned. Thank you, Gateway Pundit. Thank you for being journalists, getting in there, digging in there, getting information that we need. So then he goes on and thanks these other people and makes a correction at the bottom. An earlier version of this article said that Phil O'Halloran believes that GBI Strategies is engaged in voter fraud across the state of Michigan. O'Halloran has said that he would like to clarify that he believes that they are innocent until proven guilty, and that he is concerned that a fair investigation has never occurred. Wow. This stuff is amazing to me. We have just wild, just wild voter nonsense in this country, and nobody's paying attention. Voter fraud in Michigan, all this stuff, and nobody knew anything until the Gateway Pundit brought it out. People, we have to be vigilant. We need to seek out reputable information. We need, and I'm not talking about Fox News and stuff like that. I'm talking about we need to do our own individual homework. We need to scrutinize our elected officials and our media sources, because these people would have us in a tether. They would have us blind. They would have us not thinking. They would have us to be not thinking people. And the problem is schools have quit teaching civics. So we have these kids that are growing up, don't even know the fundamentals of government. They don't know that we have a judicial, an executive, and a legislative branch of federal government, which is pretty much mirrored throughout the states. They just go along to get along as long as nobody's bothering them. And the fact that many of these states are now legalizing marijuana and drugs, and those things are popular with young people, young, naive people. They were popular in my time when I was young, but they were illegal then. But now, when you're making this kind of stuff legal, people get relaxed, they get anesthetized. And an anesthetized mind is a controlled mind. Need to be in your faculties rather, if you want to understand what's going on, because people want to control you. I remember during the lockdown, it was amazing. They locked down the churches, but the marijuana stores and the liquor stores were never locked down. Think about it. They didn't want people to get theological training. They didn't want them to get biblical understanding, but they want you to be able to get high. They want you to be able to get drunk. Why? Why would a liquor store be a place that had to stay open when they were shutting down everything else? Why would a weed store have to be open? Because they want to control your mind. They want to pacify your thinking. If they can pacify your thinking, they can just put all kinds of crap on you. And you, before you know it, you're engulfed in it. How do you think we got to the point where we have drag queen story hour in the elementary schools? That stuff would have never been possible if we would have been on our job. But now they creep all this crap in there on us, and now we have to play catch up. We have to fight from behind. But that's okay. Let's fight from behind. We understand where we are. We made our mistakes. We have to get up, dust ourselves off, and fight now and going forward. We need to fight for our children. We need to fight for our wives. We need to fight for our family. We need to fight for this country. Because if we don't fight for it, who's going to fight for it? If we don't stand up and be counted, who's going to be counted? We can't sit around and wait for somebody else to take care of it. Each and every one of us is responsible for how we got to where we are, and each and every one of us is responsible to get out of this mess. Think about it. This is Sam Tolley, and I'm out.